Okay, hello. Yes. And welcome to my second annual Halloween Spooktacular random horror movie ranking. Um, this is a bit of an experiment because I'm trying out some new recording software here, trying out OBS because Clipchamp just kept breaking over and over and over, and I stopped making videos for a while because it was just stressing me out because a lot of the time I would, be recording something for like 10 minutes and I would I wouldn't be able to duplicate it again, and then it would just freeze and crash, and I would lose that file forever, and I would have to start from the beginning. So hopefully this will be more stable, and I will be able to make videos in the future without fear. But we will see. Um, so basically the idea here, and I did this last year, as the title would imply, is that watch at least one horror film every day during the month of October. I threw in a couple of extras just because some of these films, it's questionable if they're horror films. Look, the sun is fucking burning directly into my eyeballs. Can we, can we have a, yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's just get to it. I will say, I try not to be too negative on here, and I don't want to be like one of those channels that just like rips apart movies that I consider bad. Just because a lot of movies, any movie takes a lot of work, whether you like it or not. So, but unfortunately, with the nature of a list like this, I am going to have to be negative at the beginning. For the first four or five entries, but then we'll move into movies I like, and we can get away from that negativity. Starting with my least favorite film I watched in October, which was Exorcist II: The Heretic. I had spent, years hearing about, how this was one of the worst movies ever made. And everything I saw about it indicated to me that I might actually enjoy it because I heard that it was a big swing and it took a lot of creative risks and took the series in a really strange direction. And it was just like that's the kind of thing I'm into sometimes, and you will see that later in the list with some of these entries. So I went into it with an open mind, thinking that, even if this isn't a great movie, I might, really just enjoy how audacious and strange it is. And that did not happen. This is awful. It's really boring. That's the problem. There is some goofy, crazy shit that happens, but it's just it's a boring film. The occasionally strange visuals can't make up for the fact that it's so tedious. And this film is full of really great actors. You have Linda Blair, who, was fantastic in the first Exorcist, and she was a kid then, so this is years later. So you'd think that, in that time she would have, gotten more experience acting. She would be even better in this movie. But it's not the case. And you have Academy Award winners in here like Richard Burton and Louise Fletcher. These are obviously, actors who are fantastic a lot of the time, and they're not good in this movie. I mean, James Earl Jones shows up at one point wearing a giant locust costume, and that's pretty fun. But then that segment really goes off the rails. I don't know. It's just, I think last year or the year before, at some point in the past, that movie Exorcist Believer came out, that one that David Gordon Green did, and a lot of people were like, this is an insult to the franchise and all of this. And I didn't feel that way. I felt like that film was, not great, but quite entertaining. I had fun watching it. Um, this is an insult to the first film. I really feel that way. I feel like it retroactively makes the first film a little bit worse. That this is what it was leading to. It's not good. All right, number 33 is Possession, and this might be somewhat controversial placement because this is kind of the opposite of The Exorcist 2, where that one I'd heard for years about how bad it was. This one I'd heard for years how great it was, how it was this like unheralded masterpiece, and I clearly did not feel that way. People who love this film, would just probably accuse me of, just not getting it, and I would say that's accurate. I just didn't get it. It just wasn't for me. And I have no issue with, weird movies. I like a lot of weird movies. And I will say the lead actress in this is Isabel Angi, or however you pronounce it. She's incredible. You know, she is the, the possessed person that the title would imply, and so she's delivering this big performance where she's just like screaming and convulsing and doing all this crazy shit, and she totally nails it. Like, she's brilliant. The problem is that everybody in the movie is acting that way. Like, it makes sense for her to do it, but it doesn't make sense for her like uh, boyfriend to do it, and for the guy she's cheating on her boyfriend with to do it. And it's like every character in this film acts like a complete fucking lunatic all of the time for no reason, and it just dulls the impact of it. It was just like pounding on my brain. It's just like constant fucking noise, and I found it really pretentious, and there was like nothing here beyond her performance that I connected with, and everybody else acting like a fucking possessed maniac made her performance, it kind of muted it a little bit even. So yeah, I didn't like this one, but I mean clearly a lot of people do. So your mileage may and probably will vary with that. Number 32, War of the Worlds, the new one with Ice Cube. It feels kind of ridiculous to put this ahead of Possession, but it honestly, if I had to watch one of those two movies again, I would pick this one. Because, I mean, this is a bad movie, obviously, but I think it's bad in an entertaining way. Like, this is a fun bad movie. Like, if you want to get some friends together and just watch this and like make fun of it and crack jokes the whole time, I think you'll have fun. I will say, like, the premise of this, when I heard the premise, I obviously had reservations about it, but I wasn't ready to dismiss it because I think the idea of doing a War of the Worlds movie as like a found footage thing and like a screen life thing, I think that is an idea that actually has a lot of potential. Like, if this happened, if we were invaded by aliens, that is how we would process it. We would see videos on our social media feeds, and people would be making Reddit threads about, theories about why the aliens are here and what they want from us, and a movie that captured that captured, how fractured that would be and how easy it would be for like misinformation to spread and all of that. That could be really interesting. But that is not what this movie does. Because in order for that to really have any impact, it would need to be from the point of view of like a normal person. And Ice Cube in this movie is not a normal person. He's like an omniscient god who can control everything. And hilariously, part of the point of the movie is that he can't control everything, and he thinks he has all this power, and he doesn't. But he does. I mean, he can't control the aliens because they are not of this realm, but he can control everything on this terrestrial plane. It's basically just him sitting on a computer, and he can see everything and hack everything. Like this guy is like the worst father ever. There's like a scene where, he's supposed to be like spying on, potential terror threats and protecting the nation and all that stuff. And he's spending his time, he's spying on his daughter as she's buying breakfast, right? And then he calls her on the phone and is like, "Oh, really? You bought a muffin? Really? A muffin?" And she's just like, "What? How do you know I bought?" And it's just like, and then he cuts to a shot from inside her fridge. He has a camera inside her fridge, and I don't know how we can see what's in there because fridge lights, they turn on when the door is open. So is her fridge door open? It's like It's that feels really pedantic to bring up stuff like that, but that's just stuff like that. These logical leaps are happening constantly in that film. So now he's going through her fridge and he's making fun of the things she bought, and he's being like, "I made you some hard-boiled eggs. You should have one hard-boiled egg every day for breakfast, and not a fucking muffin." And it's just like, this is not like helicopter parenting. This is not just like, "Oh, dad, you're so lame." This is like criminal. This is like calling the police and never talking to your dad again kind of shit. So, yeah, it's it's a terrible movie, but I had a good time. Also, I will say, just, and this is nothing against Ice Cube. I think he's like a charismatic guy. He has screen presence. But this film, there have been films like this before where it's basically just one guy and you're just focusing on his face for the entire movie. Like Jake Gyllenhaal recently did a movie like this called The Guilty, where he plays like a phone operator. But in order for this to work, this entire movie is just banking on the face of the actor and their ability to emote. Why would you cast Ice Cube in that type of role? Like, he's not that type of actor. He's really fun on screen, but he's not like the most like emotionally available actor in the world. So it's just the whole thing. The whole thing is very ill-advised. Number 31 is the new Conjuring film, The Conjuring Last Rites. I had real reservations about this just because The Conjuring 3 I'd found really disappointing after loving the first two, and this was the same director coming back from the third one. I will say this is an improvement over the third one, but I would still say it's my second least favorite in the series by like a wide margin. And by that, I'm just saying the four Conjuring films. I'm not talking about like the Annabelles and the nuns and all that stuff. I don't know. This movie is fine. I find these movies like weirdly cozy for some reason. I think it's just because the way Ed and Lorraine Warren are presented in these films, they're just kind of like a comforting presence. Um, but yeah, this movie is just it's good enough to get the job done, but it doesn't have those moments from the other ones that made them really special. Those, really inventive scares and those moments where they built tension so effectively. It's just it's a functional movie and it's good enough, but it's not special, I would say, in any way. Number 30 is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I had seen another Frankenstein film the day I watched this, which will be much higher on this list. And so I wanted to keep the Frankenstein party going, so I decided to watch Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein. And I think this will be the last film on the list that I really didn't enjoy. There is stuff I liked about this movie. There's some really weird shit he threw in here. Like there's this part where he's testing, he has that device that kind of, conducts the lightning and brings it down. And he's like testing that with Elizabeth and some other members of their family and stuff, and they're like shooting sparks out of their fingers and stuff, and this is like him and Elizabeth touch fingers, and there's literally a spark between them, and it's like, oh, I get what you're doing, so it's like stuff like that is fun, but it's just this is one of the most melodramatic movies I've ever seen. Just everybody is just constantly just like so over the top in it, and it's just he must have done it on purpose because like everybody is acting that way. Um, except for De Niro. I mean, De Niro has a couple of very melodramatic moments as the monster, but he's also, pretty effective in some scenes. This is a much less sympathetic portrayal of the monster than like the Boris Karloff movies. In this, he's much more focused on you know, being being all murdery. and stuff. And but De Niro still manages to bring, some level of empathy to the character. I'm gonna close Discord. People are talking on there. But yeah, I mean he does. Oh my God, everything is making noises. Fucking. Why doesn't my phone know that I'm trying to entertain? All right. Um, yeah, De Niro does his best. He does the best he can, and I think he could have been an interesting monster. But the problem is his makeup design and everything. He looks so fucking goofy that it's like it's really hard to take him seriously, and that kind of goes for the entire movie. It's just kind of a big, goofy kind of mess with some admirable elements. All right. Yeah, now we're getting into the films that I thought were, maybe not fantastic, but like solid. And we're starting with the Hellraiser remake by David Bruckner. Um, I think this movie is fine. Fine. I like the new actress playing Pinhead. I thought that was an interesting place to take that character. And the music was good enough. I mean, everything about this movie is good enough. I will say, like, I'm not a huge fan of this franchise. I've only seen a couple of them, and it's never been like my franchise of choice. But from what I've seen, this is easily the best written, the best scored, the best shot Hellraiser movie ever. So if you're looking for something in that formula, but just, a little bit elevated while still being kind of junky, this is it's a fun film. I enjoyed it. Number 28 is Strange Harvest, and this is a recent film. I think it came out in like maybe some film festivals last year, but it's coming out more widely this year. And this is kind of a mockumentary about this masked guy here going around extravagantly murdering people. And for the most part, they did a good job. I mean, these fake documentaries, they like kind of hinge on everybody being able to perform very naturalistically, for the acting to be like invisible. And for the most part, everybody in this does a good job with that. I will say there were some moments in this that broke the illusion for me, where they couldn't resist just like showing these scenes of like crazy gore, and it's just like in a typical documentary of this nature, like if you're watching like a true crime documentary on Netflix or something, which like this is kind of aping that formula, you wouldn't just see, a full-on uncensored picture of a person who's been like horribly murdered and mutilated and stuff. So those moments took me out of it. Like, they're supposed to be impactful and freak you out, but to me, it just emphasized kind of the fakery of it. But I will say, for the most part, this is like a compelling, well done fake documentary. It's an interesting kind of narrative they weave with interesting killer at its center. Just it's a fun movie. Just don't expect anything exceptional, I would say. All right, number 27, Shelby Oaks, the new film from YouTubist Chris Stuckman. This was an interesting movie because there is a lot about this movie that I admire. I think it's shot very well. I think the acting in it is quite strong. Um, and I think that the just the form of it, that it starts out as kind of like the fake documentary style, and then it cuts to a more traditional um third person kind of style, but incorporating elements of found footage and all of that. That's all very interesting, and I think that for a first film that wasn't made for a ton of money. This is a good attempt, and I think he has potential as a filmmaker. I think he has less potential as a writer. I think the writing is definitely the weak point in this, like the characterization. You never really get to know any of these characters in like an impactful way, and that really limits the emotional potential of the movie. Um, but there's a lot here that I think he could build upon and make something really good in the future. So I will still be excited to see where he goes from here. Number 26 is Altered States, which this is a fucking weird movie. It's just about William Hurt, and somehow this was William Hurt's first movie performance, and it's like a lead where he's carrying like pretty much the entire film. So that's crazy that he got that for his debut. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, and I mean it's a movie. It's written by Patty Chayefsky. It's directed by Ken Russell, who made Tommy and Listomania and all these weird movies, weird 60s, 70s movies. And yeah, this is about a guy who just basically stays in a deprivation tank all day until he becomes a werewolf. Um, for all intents and purposes. And it's an interesting film. It's an odd film. I loved one of the side characters in here. I'm trying to remember. Was it? Yeah, it was Mason, who he just comes into every scene like already like he's just so pissed off, just like constantly, and the actor's delivery is just like fantastic. I love that guy. But for the most part, yeah, this is just a really strange, and I think I was kind of emotionally distant from it because I think the main character is kind of emotionally distant. Like I never fully got into his brain, but if you want to see some crazy, trippy, psychedelic shit, it's worth checking out. Number 25 is the beta test, and this is one that was, in the horror section that I'm not so sure is a horror film in a traditional sense, though, you know, it is like a horrifying situation in that if this happened to you, you would be terrified. I mean, I think there's definitely elements there to this. The last time I did this, my favorite movie that I saw was The Wolf of Snow Hollow, which was another movie by this writer, director, actor Jim Cummings. And so that film also it had horror elements, but I don't know that I would classify that as like a traditional horror film. And this is kind of the same way. In that in this case, I think it's even more questionable. But yeah, it's an interesting movie. It's definitely out of the three movies he's made, Wolf, Snow Hollow, and Thunder Road, and this is definitely my least favorite of the three. But I still think it's definitely worth watching. It's about this guy who gets like a invitation to meet this random lady at a hotel, and it's just it's about how he goes through with this experience, and it's supposed to be like this completely anonymous thing, like nobody's supposed to know who anybody is, and it just it it really impacts his life because he goes through with it and then he unpacks it and then he's like, why did this happen, what does this mean, who are these people, and it just kind of spirals out from there. So it's an interesting film. I mean, Jim Cummings, he always plays with like the likability of these characters. Like it's always a really like razor thin line between like you start out not liking them and you end up liking them and empathizing with them. He's able to do that. He's a good enough actor and writer to be able to do that. But I will say in this film, this was the hardest time I had. Like his character in this is just like a total asshole, and I had trouble empathizing with him, honestly. But if you've seen his other two films and you like them, you should certainly give this one a try as well. Number 24 is Black Phone 2. This is not a great film by any means, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed how batshit crazy it was. Like when they announced they were doing a sequel to The Black Phone, I was confused because I was like, how can you make a sequel to that movie? Like no spoilers, but that story does not lend itself to a sequel the way it ends. Um, and they just came up with the craziest possible solution to that problem and took the franchise in like a radically different direction. And you know, I appreciate that. I appreciate how crazy it was. This is like the kind of idea that you would like come up with at like 3 a.m. after you've been like brainstorming all night and you just need to go home, so you need to get something on paper. And it's just like they poured like millions and millions of dollars into that. So I admire it for that. I mean, you know, the once again, the writing in this movie is not great. The plotting isn't great. There's a lot of things in this film that'll give you pause where you think, does that make sense? Does that make sense? There's over explaining, of the lore and all of that. But I did admire just, how far they went with this, and that, not only did they come up with this crazy idea, but they took it this far and executed it to this level. I kind of admired that. Number 23 is Mithrigan 2. Um, and this is another one that I would say is not really a horror film. The first Mithrigan was a horror film. I would say it was like a horror comedy. But this is like an action comedy. This is like a full genre switch. Um, and I will say, based on the trailers for this, I thought this was going to be like really dumb. And it is. Sorry about that, Rain. But I think it's dumb in a pretty entertaining and likable way. Like I enjoyed this movie. Um, there were a couple of moments in it that made me laugh really hard that I am going to spoil just because I want to talk about them. The first one is that the little girl in the first one, and she's a little older now. She's been learning like self-defense, understandably based on what happened in the first movie, and she's learning Aikido because her idol is Steven Seagal. And there's even a shot, where she's like at high school or whatever, and there's like a photo of Steven Seagal hanging in her locker, and I found that really funny. And then there's also a scene where Mithrigan is trying to give, the main character a pep talk, about, how hard it is to be a good mom and all of this. And she just starts singing That Women's Work by Kate Bush, and she gets through like an entire verse and a chorus and into another verse. It is those moments made me really laugh. And I think there is, some fun action and choreography in here. It kind of reminded me of that Lee Winnell movie Upgrade, but not as good, but that kind of thing. And so yeah, I had fun with it. Absolutely don't watch it if you want to be scared or something, because it's not that kind of movie. Number 22 is Suitable Flesh. Um, this is from the writer of Reanimator. I don't know if I think he did the whole franchise, at least the first one. And so I was curious to check it out. And I will say, I didn't like this at first. It had this, kind of knowing tone to it that I found kind of annoying at the beginning. But it did win me over by the end. Like all of the actors in this are like super committed to this premise and really throw themselves into it. And it just got to such an insane place by the end of the movie that I kind of had to respect it. So yeah, I will say it was kind of a mixed bag, but definitely more positive than negative. It's like a crazy kind of it's another kind of weird Lovecraftian kind of body horror concept where people are able to live in other people's consciousnesses and stuff like that. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. Number 21 is Phantasm 2. I believe I watched the first Phantasm when I did this last year, and I thoroughly enjoyed that movie. I will say I think I enjoyed this one a little bit less. I mean, the first Phantasm, it wasn't like horrifying or anything, but it did have some moments that kind of spooked me out and got under my skin. And that didn't really happen with this one. I just think this is basically like a really fun action horror kind of hybrid. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. But it didn't have like the impact of the first one for me. Like the tall man I found, quite unnerving in the first movie. And in this one he was a little goofier, not quite as intimidating. Um, but Don Coscarelli movies, they're so distinctive. He really has a unique feel to his films. So, if you like the first Phantasm, you like Bubba Hotep, you'll like this too. It's a fun movie. Number 20 is Cloud. And this is a film by a direct let me look up how to pronounce his name because I don't want to do it wrong. Yeah, Kiyoshi Kurosawa, right? So he's a pretty famed Japanese horror director. He did stuff like he did like Pulse and Cure and movies like that. And this is another one that I would say is like barely a horror film, if it's a horror film at all. Um, it's just kind of about this guy who resells stuff online and basically, swindles people, like makes more money off this stuff than it would cost if they just like went to the store. And he's able to do that because he's like buying all the inventory. So if people want this stuff, they have to get it through him. You know how reselling works. So basically, it's about him um, going through life in this very selfish way, and as such, like amassing a lot of enemies, like a lot of people who are pissed at him for various reasons, and then that boils over, and basically all these people who he's wronged, decide to do something about it. So it's a fun, like suspenseful movie, and it does have that like home invasion element to it, which is kind of where the horror comes in if it is there. Um, but I don't know, I didn't quite believe the plotting all the time. Like I agreed that the main character was a jerk, but I don't know if he did anything that would like constitute what these people want to do to him. It felt kind of odd to me, but that they do establish that one of them's like a psycho, so it makes sense for that guy to be as mad as he is. But I don't know, it rang a little false to me, but it was a very well made movie, very well shot movie, very tense, very well paced, and yeah, I enjoyed it. Number 19 is Sinister. This is yeah, this and Insidious I had never seen, and I still haven't seen Insidious. I have to go back and watch that maybe next year, but because those are the three kind of big, well, maybe what are the big Blumhouse franchises like Sinister, Insidious, The Conjuring, and then maybe yeah, Paranormal Activity, and then maybe you throw The Purge in there. Those are kind of the main ones. Um, yeah. So it felt weird, because I loved the Conjuring movies. It felt weird to just have not seen Sinister and Insidious. So I figured, give at least one of them a shot. And this movie is fine. Um, like Black Phone 2, because both of those movies are made by Scott Derrickson. Um, one of the best things about both of those films is the way he incorporates like this grainy kind of film footage into it. There's just something really creepy about the nature of those images, the way that he films them. And so those moments in this film, it's basically, about this writer who moves into a new house and he discovers these like snuff films up in the attic. Um, and having to just sit there and watch these snuff films is the most impactful part of the movie. It's really well done. Um, but then beyond that, it's a little mundane, I think. Like the main villain didn't really have much presence to me, and they call him Mr. Boogie, which is not an intimidating name. And once again, like with Black Phone 2, he has this exposition problem where he randomly, like, at this point, he's like, okay, now I want the audience to know what's going on. So he literally has Vincent D'Onofrio zoom in to the movie, like zoom call into the movie and just explain all of the lore. And then, he's just like, well, that's everything. See you later. And then he leaves. And it was just like, that's like, it was almost a hilariously terrible way to deliver that exposition. Like, almost to the point where it's just like, is this intentional, like, meta humor? Like, I don't, probably not. Um, but yeah, yeah, overall, you know, I enjoyed this, but all those claims of it being like this is the scariest movie of all time, not in my opinion. Number 18 is Jason X. And sorry about the blacks. I'm getting used to it. I'm getting used to it. You know, I'm bad at making videos. But Jason X, yeah, is Jason in space, basically. And I thought it was gonna be, really dumb and entertaining in a stupid way, and it was. But there is, kind of a self-referential kind of element in this to the humor, where they know they're making something dumb and they just really embrace it and have fun with it. And there's like stupid stupidity and there's like smart stupidity, where it's just like, and I think, you can be stupid in a smart way if you're like purposeful about it, and you know what you're doing. And I think they achieved that in this movie. Like there's like some world building in this movie. I liked the world of the film. I liked some of the little elements of world building they just kind of threw in there at random times. It was I would watch another movie in this universe. Jason doesn't have to be in it. I just, I had fun with it. I don't know. Shoot me. So next one is Bone Lake. This is a new movie. I did it again. I did it fucking again. This is a new film from this year, basically about this couple who they want to get like a vacation house for the weekend, and they show up, and another couple is already there. And so, they don't know how to handle the situation because, like, both of them have, like, reserved this house for the weekend somehow. And so they decide, let's just stay together, you know? And, if any of us, start, like, creeping each other out or anything, we can just, call it off and, go our separate ways. But we can at least try to have a nice weekend together. And it spirals out from there. Like from the beginning it's clear that this couple who was like already at the house when they showed up, that there's something off about them, like something's wrong with their brains, and that just becomes clearer and clearer throughout the film. And the tension builds, and it's a really fun movie, and it ends in a place that's you know pretty sick, pretty disturbed, and in a fun way. I thought I enjoyed it. Number 16 is Big Shark, the new film by Tommy Wiseau. I have a whole review for this movie on my channel. But yeah, I got to see this, in like a roadshow screening with like Greg Sestero, um, Tommy's friend who wrote the book about him, The Disaster Artist, and who appeared as Mark in The Room. He's not in this movie actually, which I thought was interesting because he was in the trailer. He ended up getting recast for some reason. Um, but yeah, it's just if you've seen The Room, like this is a bad movie, but it's very endearing. And like Tommy has like a quality to him that's like so unique and so specific. And that is preserved in this film. It's a lot of fun. But if you want to hear extended thoughts on that, you can check out my my review, which I will link below if I remember, which I probably won't remember. Next is Carnival of Souls, which is, you know, it's an interesting movie. You can tell that it's kind of like low budget and scrappy, and that kind of adds to it, because that's not what I was expecting from the movie. But that kind of lo-fi nature of it, I think, gave it more freedom than maybe it would have had at the time if it was like going through like the traditional studio system. And they emerge with something that's like very interesting, very atmospheric. Not like the scariest movie I've ever seen, but it definitely does get under your skin. And yeah, I don't want to say too much about it because the plot is actually it's pretty simple, but what it accomplishes, it does through its atmosphere and its sense of place and its makeup design, which is like not elaborate, but it is effective. So yeah, it's a cool movie. Number 14 is Monkey Shines. This is a movie by George Romero, basically about a guy who is paralyzed, who gets a helper monkey from his friend. His friend works in a lab where they kind of test drugs on monkeys, and he has one monkey who he's been testing this specific drug on, to like, raise the monkey's intelligence. So he's just like, I'm just gonna, because this monkey is, smarter than the average monkey, because of all these drugs I've been pumping into him, I'm just going to give this monkey to my friend and he can help out my friend. And his friend and the monkey, at first their relationship is very sweet. They love each other. The monkey's just his pet, and he helps him out, and he brings some happiness into his life at a time where he's very isolated. And that was actually the part of the movie that affected me the most because, like I really value, my relationship with my dog, and I've just, and all the pets I've had in the past, there's something just special about that bond, and so seeing that develop, and then seeing it be corrupted and twisted is it's sad. It's sad. But it's a really fun film with a really good monkey performance. Also, the guy who plays his friend, the guy who works in the monkey lab, I thought he nailed that part. Did a great job. It's not, Ramiro's, in a lot of his films, he has like this kind of complex, like social commentary beneath the surface. This movie's just kind of about an evil monkey, but it's a good time. Also, I did not know because there's that Simpsons episode where Homer gets a pet monkey and he just basically like ruins the monkey's life and makes him really fat and feeds him a bunch of junk food and stuff, and he's just like, you know can't do any of his fun monkey things anymore because he's just too fat and lazy. And Mojo, that's his name, he Homer just like ruins Mojo's life. And I did not realize that episode was just like a parody of this movie, but it very much is. So that's nice. Number 13 is Where Evil Lurks. This is a film where I mean, it's kind of a zombie movie in a way. It's basically about this disease that's spreading through this town. And it's basically a disease of possession. It's like this evil that's like contagious and can be passed from person to person. And so it basically means that, if somebody in your life is infected by this evil, it can turn them into like this husk of themselves and cause them to be to do evil and violent things. And so that premise really lends itself to a lot of very emotionally effective moments, and there certainly are a lot. Like this movie, it does have stuff at times that'll just like, freak you out. Like there's like some shocking stuff in this movie. And I really liked the way they built the reality of this film. Like it's very much set in the real world, but it's not like these characters are like discovering the nature of this disease, Like this is something they've known about for a while, and it's just like a part of their daily lives. It's just like an inconvenience they have to deal with. And so I liked the way they handled that. And the way that this is a film where there's much more showing than telling, which I really liked. And it's like it's super tense. It's very upsetting at times. I wouldn't say it's a fun movie, but if you're in the mood for something a little darker, it's definitely worth a watch. Number 12 is Fresh, which is a very entertaining movie. It's basically about this woman played by Daisy Edgar Jones who goes on this date with this guy played by Sebastian Stan, and she's had like a lot of bad luck with trying to date and find somebody who's not either boring or weird or and so she really likes Sebastian Stan. She finds him charming and funny and all that stuff, and it turns out that he is a cannibal, and he's just trying to gain her trust so that he can kidnap her and eat her. um, and that's most of the movie. Um, and I will say, like, the dynamic between the two characters was always really interesting. They played off each other really well. Um, it's a very well written movie. Sebastian Stan, kind of kills it in this part, both literally and figuratively. But I think the thing keeping this out of the top 10 was for a couple of years I'd heard about like how awesome the ending of this movie was, and I didn't really find it to be. I think it was because it had gotten hyped for me to the point that I was imagining this very strange, very subversive ending in my head. Like I had made up an ending for the film in my brain as I was watching it. And then when it went for something kind of more conventional at the end, but still fun, but just, nothing out of the ordinary, I was a little disappointed. But yeah, very entertaining movie. I do recommend. Number 11 is The House on Haunted Hill, which just a really fun old haunted house movie with Vincent Price, directed by William Castle, who was famous for kind of incorporating. He would like use these gimmicks in the theater, like the tingler, which would like shake your seat, and at certain times in the movie, things like that. Piping noises into the theaters and whatnot, and just like sensory experiences like that. And so what's fun about this movie is, you're constantly asking yourself throughout it, like, it's almost like a self-insert from William Castle into the Vincent Price character, because there are elements of this that are staged, where they're like trying to freak people out, where it's basically like a really hardcore haunted house. And then, part of the fun of the movie is figuring out, okay, what's really going on? What's actually like supernatural here? And what is stuff that Vincent Price and his weird wife are doing behind the scenes? So yeah, it's a real entertaining movie, and you gotta love Vincent Price. So we're gonna move into the top 10 now, but my throat hurts, because I've been talking too much. I don't know how long I've been going, but it's definitely been for too long. So I'm gonna take a drink and reconsider my life choices, and then we will come back and do my top 10. Hmm. It's another day. I'm wearing my divorce shirt. Let's just let's do the top 10. Starting with Kronos. This is the first feature length, at least, film by Guillermo del Toro. And, while this isn't at the level of what he would accomplish later, of course, with stuff like, Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth, like these amazing masterpieces, this is still a really interesting and endearing movie. It's the first time he works with Ron Perlman too, and just a lot of the hallmarks of what makes his work special are here already. And this is, a horror film in the sense that it deals with the supernatural, it deals with monsters, it deals with this kind of haunted or, cursed object that corrupts the user. Um, but more than that, it's kind of just about, this. I think I what is he? Is he the boy's is he your grandfather? What is he? It's about this older family member. I can't remember if he's her grandfather or yeah, he's a grandfather. I thought he was like her uncle for some reason. I don't know. But the point is, God, I should just start again, but fuck it. No, I mean it's more about the relationship between these two characters and this bond between them, and how this the grandfather is like trying to hide as he's being corrupted by this device. He's trying to keep his granddaughter away from that because he doesn't want to mess her up, but she's just like, no, I love you, I want to be there for you, I want to help. And the relationship between them is really nice. And Guillermo del Toro always does this where he kind of sneakily makes these movies into coming of age movies. Because like Pan's Labyrinth and Devil's Backbone are both very much coming of age movies that are very sincere, but they're told in this very huge kind of fantastical way. And that's a big part of what makes him so special, I think. So it was cool to see that here already. Yeah, I know. This movie has like a 15 on Rotten Tomatoes or something. Like everybody hates this movie. I think the difference for me is that I'm not really a fan of this franchise. So I like when they go a little, when they make like a left turn like they did with Jason X or with this. You know, Jason, as we would typically know him, is in this movie for maybe like, I don't know, 2 minutes. And then, it turns out that Jason is this evil worm monster, and he just keeps infecting all these other people. For some reason, they're all like middle-aged men who are out of shape, who then go around doing his like murderous bidding and stuff. And God, I just found this so fucking entertaining. Like there is a character in this named Creighton Duke, and Creighton Duke is potentially one of my favorite characters in any movie ever. He's absolutely insane, and I don't understand why he did like 75% of the things he did. And they never try to explain it, they never try to justify it. He's a fucking weird lunatic. Like there's this part, throughout the whole thing, he possesses this knowledge of Jason. Like he knows how to stop Jason, and they never explain how he knows that information. He just knows it like intrinsically. And so there's this guy who's in prison. They're both in prison. They're in different cells, and he needs to get out of prison and he needs to save his girlfriend from Jason, right? And so Creighton Duke is like, I'll tell you what I know about Jason, but you gotta pay the cost. And he's just like, well, what do I have to do? And he's just like, I'm not gonna tell you. You just have to agree to do it. And then he's like, well, okay, I guess. And then he breaks like one of his fingers, and he tells him a factoid about Jason. And then the guy asks him another question. He's like, well, if that's true, then can we do this? And he's just like, you're not going to get that one for free. And then he breaks another one. And it's just, what the fuck is this? You know? It's, God, I love that guy. And, at the end of the day, he doesn't even like he's not the like hero who stops Jason. He's just a fucking weird maniac, and I love him. And this movie is famous for it teases the Freddy vs. Jason, with the glove coming up at the end and pulling the mask down into hell. And I am not convinced that anybody had an inkling that that was going to happen when he did this. Like, I would not be surprised if he was just like, let's just throw the glove in there because it's cool, you know? Because he does that. Like, he's admitted that he was much more of an Evil Dead fan than a Jason fan, and the fucking Necronomicon from the Evil Dead, like the one from the Evil Dead that's like made out of human skin with the weird face on it is just in this movie for no reason. This movie is just like whatever. Jason and Evil Dead take place in the same universe. And it's like you can't do that. And it's just like, well, why not? Why not? It's fucking make believe. I can do whatever I want. And you think about it for a second and it's like, fuck yeah, you can. It's refreshing. It's exciting. I like it. Videodrome. Um, this is a lot of people consider it to be like David Cronenberg's masterpiece. I know there's like some debate about that as to what's his best movie. Is it Scanners? Is it The Dead Zone? Is it, yeah, he's made a lot of great movies. My personal favorite is History of Violence, which I know is kind of not the typical Cronenberg thing, but I just really love that movie. But in terms of like his body horror stuff, I've been getting more into that in recent years. Like, loving the substance as much as I did really opened the door for me. And, because I always used to steer away from this stuff because it's just like, it's gore and stuff. It's like, it's gross and it makes me uncomfortable and I don't want to see it. But then having so much fun with the substance, I was just like, okay, I'm at a point in my life where this is just fiction and I can, you know, just, just enjoy the magic of this and the practical effects and the creativity of it. And I'm at this point I find movies that operate on that level, as long as they have, some heart to them and something to say, it's more inspirational than anything. It's more like a work of ingenuity, the amazing effects work in this movie and the incredible creativity of it. It's a crazy film. Um and, James Woods is in it playing a sleazy shitty guy, and nobody plays a sleazy shitty guy better than James Woods. He is built for that shit. And also Debbie Harry from Blondie is in this movie, and she's actually really good in this. Really good. Um and I don't know, this movie has it's got some shit that's it'll make you cringe, like as it goes on and things progressively get worse. It's just, it builds up this feeling of dread and hopelessness, like very effectively, and it's a cool movie. I'll say that. Number seven is Dog Soldiers. This was the first film, I believe, from the guy who made The Descent, Neil Marshall. And this is so high just because it was so much fun. I was surprised by this because, I just thought it was like a low budget werewolf movie, werewolves versus soldiers, that sounds entertaining. But it's like surprisingly well written and well acted, and it has kind of this like scrappy low budget thing that really lends itself to it. Like the werewolves don't even look that good in a traditional sense. Like they don't you're not gonna watch this movie and be like, was that a real fucking werewolf? It looks like a guy in a wolf costume, but somehow that never hinders the film. Somehow it's just, and I think it's because Neil knew how to do it. He knew how to cut it together so that, it didn't break your suspension of disbelief, but also it just matches the aesthetic. Like the way he shot it and the content he's shooting, it just comes together so synergistically. and it's a very entertaining film. I recommend. Number six is Oculus. This is one of the few films I had not seen by Mike Flanagan. I think after this he just has a couple I haven't seen. The first Mike Flanagan movie I saw was Ouija Origin of Evil back in 2016. And that movie was a big deal to me because, you know, Ouija it got horrible reviews. It looked awful. I was like, I have no interest in that movie whatsoever. And I never even saw it. And then the sequel to that movie Origin of Evil came out, and it started getting like surprisingly good reviews, and I was just like, that's interesting. Like the critics hated the first one. They seemed to like I didn't think that a Ouija sequel would, get that kind of critical respect. So I was curious. So I went to see it, and it was absolutely fantastic. And since then, Mike Flanagan has been one of those guys who every time he puts out a movie, he's one of those guys where I have to see it right away. You know, he's he's one of my favorite horror directors working right now. And Oculus is a super fun movie, and it's very disorienting. Essentially, it's about like a cursed mirror, which is funny because Conjuring 4 is also about a cursed mirror. So I thought that was a weird coincidence. But basically, it's this mirror that drives you insane, that like distorts your nature of reality. And that's what makes the movie so interesting, because everything you're seeing on screen, once they're in a room with the mirror, you don't really know what's really happening and what is an illusion being created by the mirror to mess with these people or to put them in danger. Because the mirror's ultimate goal is self-preservation. It wants to corrupt people, and it obviously wants to avoid being destroyed. You know, so it'll do what it has to do. And just the way this movie keeps you on your toes and disorients you, I found very entertaining and at times very emotionally effective. It's a really cool movie. Number five is Interview with the Vampire, and this goes to show you that you shouldn't like judge a book by its cover. I mean, this is a movie based on a book. You know what I mean? But it's I just always assumed like vampire romance is not my favorite subgenre. Like I'm not really into movies about hunky vampires. So I was just like I always assumed this movie would suck. I didn't even mean to make that pun, but no, I don't even want to pretend I did. I don't even want to pretend I intended to make that. No, no, let's pretend that that never happened. But yeah, this movie is so fucking entertaining. It really is. It has like this epic sweep to it, but it also has this very, clear absurdity to it. Like they know it's absurd. They know it's heightened. And like Tom Cruise in this, it was an interesting project for him to take at this time, in the mid 90s when he was kind of at the height of his powers as a movie star. Until at least, the past few years when shit has just gone nuts. But during his kind of first apex, not many movie stars have had multiple apexes. I mean, Keanu Reeves too. There are a few. Um, but yeah, Tom is like an out and out villain in this, and it's I think it's one of his better performances. Like he's really entertaining in this movie, and he's not afraid to be like grotesque and to be repulsive. And just the film, it's made by Neil Jordan, who has a really diverse filmography. He's probably most famous for making The Crying Game, which is a beautiful movie, but he's made everything from like horror movies to broad comedies to fantasy to just straight up drama. So, he he's a really cool fit for the material, and the tone of it is like very specific and very strange. It's a very odd movie, but the way they build this world up is just, I don't know what to say beyond the fact that this is one of the most purely entertaining movies on this list, and I had a real good time with it. Number four is Lake Mungo, and this is kind of the opposite of that, in that I did not have a good time watching this movie. I had actually tried to watch this movie before a couple of times, and I didn't finish it because I found it really upsetting, honestly. And it was like unpleasant, and I was just like, I don't think I'm in the mood for this. So this time I finally just forced myself to sit down and watch the whole thing. And this is another fake documentary. It's about this girl that dies, and they begin to see um, ghost-like images of her, in photographs and on video, and they start to wonder, like, is she haunting them? Is her spirit not at rest for some reason? And there are twists and turns in this movie that just really got under my skin. And unlike Strange Harvest, there are no moments in this, at least for me, where the immersion was broken, where they took it to a place where I was just like, well, that obviously wouldn't happen. And the one time where they do that is like right at the end, and where they have something flat out, you know, if this happened, it would be big news, let's say that. And it's like, it's so effective. That moment is so effective because they earn it, because they build to it, and it's just terrifying. I mean, this does a similar thing to what Scott Derrickson did with Black Phone 2 and Sinister, just in a much more extreme way, which is, a lot of this like very low quality, like film, where it's just like, it's even kind of hard to discern a little bit of what's going on. There's like a lot of noise happening in the image, and like the scariest scene in the movie, yeah, like you kind of have to squint, and to make out exactly what's going on, and that just makes it scarier, that you have to like focus on it and dig into it. And that's true of the photography in the film too. When these images of her start popping up, that a lot of the time they'll show a photograph on the screen, and you'll be like, well, perfectly normal photograph, and then they'll just start this slow zoom, and then eventually you'll see it, and everybody will see it at a different time, but eventually you'll see this ghostly figure, and it's disquieting, let's say. um and there's just one scare in this movie where I don't know if I want to reveal it, but they find something on the tape. They find something in her room that should not be there, and just the thought of like waking up to that, and your eyes getting close to the dark, you see something across the room, you're like, that's not what I think it is, right? And it just, it dawns on you that it is, and what does that mean? Like shit like that. Like I've had nightmares about shit like that, I mean, before I saw this movie. So yeah, it is. I wouldn't say it's a fun movie. um I wouldn't say it's like traditionally enjoyable, but it is very effective. Number three is Woman in the Dunes. Um, this is a Japanese movie from the mid 70s. Yeah. When did it come out? Woman in the Dunes. Nope, it came out in 1964. I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it was directed by this guy, Hiroshi Teshigara, who was kind of like an avant-garde filmmaker in Japan. Like he did, kind of cool artsy stuff that didn't you know didn't have a broad appeal, I guess. But this film does. This is not like at all like a pretentious or overly artsy film, but it is like a very powerful film, because the imagery he captures is like so poetic and so worrisome at the same time. Like this is another one where you could argue, is this even a horror film? And I think it very much is, because I mean, I just think being in this situation would be such a nightmare. Basically, I'll just give you the elevator pitch for it, you know. So this is like light spoilers, but this happens in like the first 5 minutes of the movie. It's basically this guy goes out into the desert to like study the local bug population. He's one of those guys who, he collects bugs and writes papers on bugs and um and so eventually there's some kind of storm, I think, and he has to stay over for the night. So there's this house down this hill where this woman lives, and they're just like, hey, you can crash in there for the night, you know. And then he wakes up the next day. He climbs down this ladder to get to her house, and then the next day the ladder is gone. And they're at the bottom of this pit of sand, surrounded by just walls of sand that when you try to climb up them, they just crumble under you, you know? And basically, this woman has been made to dig sand. She puts it in buckets. They haul the sand up. They do something with it. You don't even know, for a long time. And when you do learn, it's just kind of weirdly mundane. But yeah, this is her whole life is collecting sand for these people, for the other townsfolk. And so this becomes his life too. They trap him down there because they're like, if there are two of you, you'll, get more work done. So it's just him. It's the situation with the main character is very complicated because he's kind of an asshole, but you do feel for him given the situation, obviously. And, it's this constant interplay between, what's he doing just to survive? What does he really feel? Because, eventually they're spending every day together constantly. Eventually they kind of develop like a romantic connection. And it's just like, like how much of this is genuine? How much of this is planning? Because, in the back of his mind, he's always thinking like, what would be most advantageous for me in this moment? Can I get out of here? And if I can't get out of here, how can I make this situation at least like a little better for myself? And he'll be tested at various times. It's just like, are you really being altruistic, or are you being selfish? And he'll choose selfish every time. But you kind of feel like you would feel the same way if you were trapped in this situation. You would do, whatever it took to get back to your life. So it's a very very complicated, very interesting movie, very beautifully shot. It's funny because I have a family friend um who, it was a whole family, of people, and the father in this family was like a much older guy than me, obviously. I don't know how old he was. I'm bad at judging stuff like that. 40s, I don't know, when I was like 10 or 12 or something. I don't know. And he knew that I really loved movies, and he loved movies too. So, every time I would see him, he would be like, "Hey, you watch Woman in the Dunes yet?" And for years, I would just be like, not yet. So now I haven't seen that guy for like 15 years. And I decided, let's finally watch Woman in the Dunes. And he was right. It's really good. It's probably not a good film for a 10-year-old. So I don't know what I would have thought of it if I watched it back then. But it's a pretty great movie. Number two is Ju-on The Grudge. In terms of just sheer fear, like, I don't really get scared a lot at movies because, you can get scared like in a moment, but know, there's a part of you that's removed from it because you know, like, okay, these are actors, these are sets, these are events that are not really happening. There's a part of you that always knows that, you know, and you can never forget that completely, no matter how immersed in a movie you get, you know. You can forget it. You can forget it in a second, but for a sustained period of time, it's hard to like build legitimate terror, at least in my experience. But this movie did it. This movie, I was like cringing. I would notice that I was like balling up my hands into fists, and I was like clenching my jaw because it was just this movie is so hard to watch because it takes its time, you know? And the settings are so mundane. Like the world of the film is so realistic and drab that when these nightmarish elements come into it, it just makes them so much more effective, you know? Um, like this little boy on the cover here, like I fucking hate this little boy. God, he's so creepy. Oh my God. Like there's a scene in the movie, right, where a character is going up in an elevator and the elevator has like a glass wall and you see the guy going up floor after floor after floor and just on every floor, standing right in front of the elevator, is this little kid. Just floor after floor. This little kid just staring out, and it's God, it's so unsettling. God, I hate this kid. I hate him so much. And the main monster in this film, is not even it's not like a big scary twisted monster, once again it's like reasonably mundane, but it's terrifying. Yeah, every time that thing is on screen, it's just like fucking get it away from me. It's and I don't want to reveal. I don't know. I mean, if you've seen The Ring, you know that yokai thing with the pale girl with like the long black hair and stuff, and that's very much a go-to in Japanese horror, and that's kind of the case here too. So it's like it's not like some twisted monster or something, but just the way that she moves and like the facial expression she makes, it's like you want like no part of it. It's just like no fucking thank you. It's such an effective movie. I can't remember the last time where I was like affected this deeply by a horror film, just in terms of like sheer stress and just sitting there cringing. It's real good. But my number one is a new film, and it is sorry, it's Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Um, I saw this on Halloween, so I saw this on my final day of this project, and this movie just absolutely blew me away. I think this is such a beautiful film. What this film gets right for me that Kenneth Branagh's version doesn't is that I always loved the James Whale Frankenstein movies, partially because he was like a kooky weirdo and his personality was all over those films, but also because of the monster, that he made the monster so empathetic. He was like, this big scary guy, but like your heart went out to him, like he didn't want to hurt anybody. He was just put in these situations, and he didn't really understand what he was doing, you know. And the Brano one really got away from that, and we're just like, yeah, it's a big scary man with a fucked up face, and this really returned like some dignity and some humanity to that character. I mean, this is a Guillermo del Toro movie, so he kind of has a thing for like empathizing with monsters, like literal monsters, like the deer monster in Pan's Labyrinth or the fish monster in Shape of Water. He's always very empathetic to those characters, and he always kind of makes this statement, even in The Devil's Backbone, where the little kid, is friends with this other kid who's a ghost, where it's just like it's about like acceptance and empathy, you know, because well, I don't want to give too much away about like what they do, for example, with Mia Goth's character and how they kind of, twist what you're expecting with that and how that feeds into those themes. But it's cool. I enjoyed having my preconceptions kind of turned on their head. And he does that a lot in this film because, like Del Toro, he's like very aware that you've seen this story before like a million times. So what he'll do is he'll build towards something very obvious in like this very telegraphed way where you're like, I know exactly what's going to happen. And then he'll put this little twist on it, and like subvert something or alter something. And it's just really effective because, you constantly think you're ahead of the movie and you're really not. Um, but much like the book, you know, it's not concerned with like being like terrifying, with like freaking you out. It's much more just kind of an epic drama, an epic kind of, love triangle kind of generational drama, and there's a monster in it, you know. That's what the book is like, and usually the movies don't capture that. Usually the movies are just like, oh, big scary monster man, he runs around, get the torches, and this movie doesn't do, this movie is not concerned for a second with making you scared of the monster. Like, it is not trying to do that. The monster is the most likable character in this entire film, like by a pretty wide margin. And Jacob Elordi's performance as the monster is just incredible. Like, I would honestly, like n- next spring, if he wins Best Supporting Actor, I would be happy. I think he would deserve that. Um, like, he conveys so much just, through his physicality, through the very small amount of dialogue he's allowed, because a lot of it is just facial expression and movement, and he just, you never have any doubt what like the content of the monster is. It's like what he's made of, what's going on inside his head and his heart and shit. It's like you always understand him in a way. You understand him better than Victor. Who this depiction of Victor is not very likable, but he is, he's tragic. He's like deeply flawed, deeply human. And the he creates something that he doesn't understand, and it's like all the parts of himself that, that he's trying to suppress because, he has like, romantic feelings that aren't reciprocated, for example, at like one point in the film and all of this. And, he had this childhood that was, very unpleasant and traumatic at times. So it's just like he wants to like shut himself off emotionally. He wants to be cold, and it's just like he creates this thing that's like the opposite of that. That's just, that's pure and compassionate, and he can't stand it, and it repulses him. And God, it's just a gorgeous film. It's so beautifully shot. It's so, you know beautifully scored. Just, from a technical perspective, it's like immaculate. The acting in it is wonderful. It's I would say it's like perfectly paced for like a 2.5 hour movie. I was never bored. I think it's exactly the length it should be. And I will say this, the year is not over yet, but if this doesn't end up being my favorite film of the year, it is going to be very high on that list. Like, I guarantee this will be in the top 5, the top 3. It'll be somewhere in there because I love it very much. So that is the end of the Halloween retrospective thingamajig I'm doing. I recommend seeing most of these movies. I mean, honestly, I recommend seeing all of them because, you can make up your own mind, and you can tell me if I'm crazy for disliking Possession as much as I do. But if you watched, thank you for watching. Uh, got I think what do we got? 84 subscribers now, something like that. I have not done my 80 subscriber special yet. I gotta do that soon. I gotta plan something cool for that. This isn't that. I'm gonna get you something better than this for that. Um, but thanks. Bye.